The harsh rhetoric from Israel towards Palestinians has become a focal point in South Africa's case on genocide. Greetings to everyone. In today's video, we will be addressing the issue of South Africa accusing Israel of genocide at the UN World Court. This accusation is based on the inflammatory rhetoric used by Israeli leaders, soldiers, and entertainers regarding Palestinians in Gaza, particularly since the outbreak of war following Hamas's attack on October 7th. South Africa argues that this rhetoric is evidence of Israel's intention to commit genocide. Israeli leaders have downplayed these comments, attributing them to the trauma caused by the Hamas attack. However, rights groups and activists argue that they are a natural consequence of Israel's prolonged and unrestricted control over the Palestinian people, and that they have escalated during the war. Without further delay, let us begin our discussion. Describing the conflict as a battle against human animals, the intention to turn Gaza into a slaughterhouse, and the desire to completely obliterate the Gaza Strip from existence. The use of provocative language is a crucial element in South Africa's argument against Israel for genocide at the UN World Court, a claim that Israel vehemently disputes. South Africa argues that the rhetoric, including statements made by Israeli officials, military personnel, and entertainers regarding Palestinians in Gaza following Hamas's attack on October 7th, serves as evidence of Israel's intention to carry out genocide. The comments have been downplayed by Israeli leaders, with some in Israel attributing them to the psychological impact of Hamas's attack. According to activists and rights groups, the escalation of violence and dehumanization of Palestinians is an unavoidable consequence of Israel's long-standing and indefinite control over them. They argue that the unchecked use of certain rhetoric has contributed to inciting violence. According to Michael Svard, a well-known lawyer from Israel, the power of words should not be underestimated. He asserts that when language is used to justify or legitimize grave offenses against innocent individuals, it lays the foundation for others to follow suit, both socially and morally. Last week, the International Court of Justice at The Hague commenced the proceedings for the genocide case against Israel. South Africa aims to establish that Israel is engaged in the act of genocide within Gaza and possesses a deliberate intention to commit genocide. As part of its evidentiary presentation, South Africa is utilizing a multitude of strong statements. As the ground offensive commenced in late October, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made reference to the Bible in a televised speech, reminding the viewers of the atrocities committed by the Amalekites against the Israelites and emphasizing the biblical mandate to eradicate them. The intent of Israel to perpetrate genocide against Palestinians was asserted by South Africa based on the remarks made. However, Netanyahu refuted these claims and clarified that his reference to Amalek was merely a means to characterize Hamas and its assault. In the aftermath of the Hamas attack, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant characterized Israel's response as a necessary measure by declaring a comprehensive blockade on Gaza, referring to the perpetrators as inhuman beings. In a controversial statement on X, previously referred to as Twitter, Nissim Vaturi, the deputy Knesset speaker representing the Likud party, expressed a shared objective among Israelis, the complete eradication of the Gaza Strip. Amichai Eliyahu, the Israeli heritage minister affiliated with the far-right Jewish Power Party, proposed a drastic measure of employing a nuclear bomb on Gaza, asserting that there were no civilians in the region who were not involved in the conflict. During the initial stages of Israel's ground offensive, video footage captured Israeli soldiers expressing similar sentiments as they joyfully sang and danced. A journalist expressed a disturbing sentiment on X, suggesting that Gaza should transform into a place of extreme violence if the approximately 250 individuals held captive by Hamas were not released. South Africa has identified military officials and two Israeli pop singers as individuals who have made inflammatory comments. Lawyer Tembeka Nkukaitobi, speaking on behalf of South Africa, pointed out that the language used in this context reflects a systemic dehumanization. It is important to note that genocidal statements are not confined to the margins. Rather, they are ingrained in the policies of the state. In their pursuit of justice, South Africa is seeking a series of legally binding judgments to declare Israel's violation of its obligations under the Genocide Convention. This process, which may span several years, also includes a request for an interim order demanding Israel to halt hostilities, with a ruling expected within the next few weeks. During the court proceedings, Attorney Malcolm Shaw argued in defense of Israel, asserting that the comments were primarily made by officials who held minimal influence over Israeli policy. Shaw referred to these statements as random quotes that were not only misleading but had also been disavowed by Netanyahu in certain instances. During an interview, Roy Schondorf, a former Israeli Deputy Attorney General, expressed concerns about the potential risks associated with these statements, even when taken out of context. He suggested that it would have been preferable if certain remarks had not been made at all. While Israel has maintained that it would address inappropriate speech through its justice system, there are those who argue that statements targeting Palestinians have been disregarded or unacknowledged. Recently, lawyer Sfard took action on behalf of a notable group of Israeli individuals by reaching out to the country's Attorney General, seeking an explanation as to why this rhetoric has not been curbed. 2 days prior to the commencement of the case at the International Court, Attorney General Gali Baharav Miara issued a statement suggesting that advocating for harm to innocent civilians may be considered a criminal act. Israeli authorities are currently investigating multiple instances of such calls, although no further details were provided. These remarks seem to be an attempt to preempt the allegations made by South Africa. Israel adamantly refutes the accusations presented at the International Court, asserting that it is engaged in a defensive conflict with Hamas following the loss of 1,200 lives, primarily innocent civilians. According to Israeli officials, the nation abides by international law and takes extensive measures to safeguard civilians. They attribute the significant number of casualties to Hamas, who strategically position themselves within civilian regions. The health ministry in Gaza, under the control of Hamas, reports that over 24,000 individuals, primarily women and children, have lost their lives in Gaza. Israel further asserts that Hamas has demonstrated genocidal actions through its attack and expressed genocidal intentions with its aggressive rhetoric towards Israelis, which includes threats to replicate the October 7th assault and the group's unwavering commitment to the annihilation of Israel. Israel is currently engaged in a war under the leadership of its most uncompromising government to date, with far-right cabinet ministers who have a history of making controversial statements long before October 7th. There was a time when Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich expressed his desire to erase a town in the Palestinian West Bank. Similarly, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir prioritized the freedom of movement for Jewish settlers in the West Bank, placing it above the same right for Palestinians. In the days following October 7th, this type of speech has gained even more acceptance and popularity within the mainstream. The enduring conflict and its seemingly unsolvable nature have left both Israelis and Palestinians emotionally hardened. Within Israel, there are those who argue that the recent discourse can be attributed to the trauma inflicted by Hamas's unparalleled assault. According to Noah Landau, the deputy editor-in-chief of Haaretz, the profound trauma experienced collectively has unleashed a newfound freedom to openly express vengeful sentiments that were previously deemed less acceptable. Landau asserts that these statements are indicative of the prevailing social climate. Adalah, a legal rights group, reports that there is a noticeable lack of action taken to address the issue of aggressive language targeted towards Palestinians. However, it is important to note that Palestinian citizens of Israel who have demonstrated compassion towards individuals in Gaza are now being subjected to a strict crackdown. Law enforcement officials claim that their speech is considered incitement, as it either encourages violence or expresses solidarity with terrorist organizations. According to Adalah, a minimum of 270 Israeli citizens of Palestinian descent have encountered law enforcement in various capacities, such as being arrested, investigated, or issued warnings. Out of this number, at least 86 individuals have been charged with offences related to their speech. It is important to note that even some Jewish Israelis who have expressed empathy towards Palestinians have also experienced repercussions, including arrests and disciplinary actions from their employers. The response of Israel to the provocative rhetoric holds significance in the South Africa case, according to Ayel Gross, an international law professor at Tel Aviv University. As a signatory to the Genocide Convention, Israel is bound not only by the prohibition of committing genocide, but also by the prohibition of inciting genocide. According to Gross, the opportunity for Israel to demonstrate its disapproval of such speech has likely passed. Taking action against these remarks could have served as a powerful statement to both the court and Israeli society, reaffirming the state's stance against inflammatory rhetoric. He emphasized the significance of the statement, explaining that it would have conveyed the message that their intentions were not aligned with the actions. Equally important, it would have served as a directive to the soldiers on the ground, instructing them not to engage in such behavior.